Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Frank Valdez, Regional Director for Get Quorum, electronic voting provider in the state of Florida. We're going to give just a few minutes here, make sure everyone has an opportunity to check in, get started in about a minute or less. So thank you for joining us. And again, my name is Frank Valdez. We'll be right back. Hello again, everyone, and good afternoon officially here in the East Coast. My name is Frank Valdez, Regional Director for the state of Florida with Get Quorum. We're just giving about 30 seconds here for folks to get logged in. We've got the participants coming in hot and heavy, so we will give just another few seconds here and we will get started momentarily. Again, thank you for joining us. If you are attending the webinar on electronic voting, you're in the right place. Again, I see the participants continue to bubble up, so we will get started here in just a moment. All right, we've got just about 70 participants in, but good afternoon, everyone. So we'll get things started. In the interest of time, make sure that we get everybody back to their regularly scheduled day. We will get things started here with the electronic voting webinar. So again, thank you for joining us. It's good to be with you guys. My name is Frank Valdez. I'm the Regional Director in the state of Florida for Get Quorum. If you're here to attend the electronic voting and virtual meetings for Florida Condominiums, official continuing education course provided by Get Quorum, you're in the right place. And we will take note of the participants. Please make sure that you provided your LCAM license number to us in your registration. If for some reason you've not, please get that information over to us so that we can provide our license managers with the 1 hour credits for this course. A few housekeeping items. We've got a Q&A section. Please make sure to drop your questions in the Q&A, and we will try to leave ample time for that Q&A chat. As it bubbles up, maybe leave a little bit of extra time. I know that there's always questions out there in the world of electronic voting, so I want to make sure that everyone walks away with an answer if at all possible. If not, we'll make sure to answer them and get that answer over to you. So we'll get started here. Again, thank you for joining us. We've got a good amount of participants here, so let's rock and roll here. All right. So good afternoon, everyone. Again, officially, my name is Frank Valdez. I'm the Regional Director in the state of Florida for Get Quorum. We're the electronic voting provider here. And a little bit about my background: state licensed by the DBPR to teach electronic voting courses for our licensed CAMs. Prior to this role that I've been at for almost 4 years, worked in the property management industry in South Florida, served as a board member in my own 415 unit HOA, served on several committees, in addition to that, and still continue to, serve at some capacity. I know that the current president still reaches out. I'm also a consultant in my own association, if you will. By way of an agenda for today, electronic voting agenda looks the following. So we're going to do some intros. I'm going to make sure I get through the Get Quorum intro in the next slide. We're going to look at governance meetings today, how those are still rolling out. Florida statutes. I see a question already about Florida statutes. We're going to cover those in today's session. That's probably going to be the meat and potatoes of what we do here today. And yes, Florida statute does allow for electronic vote to count towards quorum. I see our first question there. And again, we're going to cover that in today's session. So that's a good segue into that. We're going to walk through virtual meetings and electronic voting at a glance. Make sure you have a good understanding what good looks like as it pertains to virtual meetings. We're going to walk through challenges, right? Like with everything else, if you are deploying electronic voting in your community, you want to make sure that you adhere to the upcoming challenges you may have. And we're going to leave you with some best practices, right? Again, in terms of the Q&A, I will make sure that we've got plenty of time for some Q&A chat. I love the dialogue back and forth. So depending on how many questions we have, again, we may leave extra time for the Q&A. All right, we'll get things started here. So in terms of Get Quorum and the company that I represent, Get Quorum is an industry-leading provider of electronic voting. Get Quorum has been around since 2016, providing electronic voting in the state of Florida. So almost 10 years in now. In addition to electronic voting, we also do provide electronic notices and paper mailing. For our communities out there, if you need some help, please do reach out after this session. We've got over 3,000 associations that we provide electronic voting to, over 30 industry experts dedicated to this, and integrations with partners, including Vanica and Front Steps as well. All right, so let's dive right in here to today's presentation. And I see the Q&A chat already getting active. So again, I do appreciate it. Put those questions in there. I promise to leave as much time as possible, but we will get through the course contents because I want to make sure that we provide you guys with the full experience of the course content in order to provide the 1 hour. Again, what I should say here is the 1 hour continuing education session, right? So we want to make sure that we can provide that 1 hour credit to all of our licensed CAMs. And again, for our board members and our CAMs, keep putting in those questions. We'll get to them. All right. So let's walk through traditional governance meetings and some of those challenges. All right. So historically, this is what we've done throughout the state of Florida for, I don't know, maybe the past almost 100 years, if not more. We've had in-person meetings. We've had printing and mailing going out in the mailbox. We've had, a lack of efficiency there because we've got to track everything manually. A lack of accessibility, right? Because those meetings usually require for owners to show up. Certainly delays in our traditional methods of having these meetings because of the fact that we are now asking owners to attend or wait by the mailbox for a ballot. From a compliance standpoint, certainly challenging there, but we're compliant. So most of the associations are sending out the notices on time. However, and getting those notices returned, it can be challenging there. From a safety perspective, again, traditionally speaking, these meetings have been held all in person. Ever since the pandemic, we certainly have been looking for some other alternative methods. But again, having these meetings all in a room, while it's nice to certainly rub elbows with, fellow owners, perhaps share a cup of coffee and a cookie, it certainly can be challenging. I know we've got communities upwards of 5,000 doors, and I can only imagine, what size of a community center you would need in order to house all of those owners if you were having a meeting. Good news for everybody here on the call today. Technology is trending. A number of condominium and HOAs in the state of Florida that have provided already the electronic voting resolution that allow electronic voting is north of 32% right now, and certainly rising. Legislation has been adopted in the state of Florida since 2015, allowing electronic voting. All right. Participation rates jump from electronic voting. On average, 20% participation rates by paper-based methods. And what we're looking at is upwards of 80%, and that includes 55 and better communities as well. So again, 2015, statutes allow for electronic voting. We'll walk through those statutes in just a moment. I want to make sure everyone walks away with the specific statutes for their type of association. We kind of parking lotted that for a while in 2015 when the statutes allowed for electronic voting. 2020 came around, pandemic strikes, and we were looking for certainly easier methods to deploy electronic voting. So here we are. Let's get to the meat and potatoes. This is definitely the slide that I want everyone to either screenshot or when we share this presentation with you, please make sure that if nothing else is remembered today, that you do remember this specific slide. Why? Because it will walk you through the statutory requirements of electronic voting. The statutes as outlined here for our condos is 718.128. The statute for our co-ops is 719.129, and we've got quite a few of those in the state of Florida still. And for our HOAs today, or POAs, I've spoken to a ton of those as well, just this week, we've got the 720.317 statute. If you'll just do a quick Google search of those statutes, it's going to walk us through a few things, and I'm going to make sure I break it down for you. I want everyone on the call to understand, if you don't already, what these statutes require, right, in order for you to deploy the electronic voting in your association. And I see we've got some questions there. So again, we will definitely make sure that we get to those as we continue. Let's get through this slide. Very first steps. Board of directors on the call today or property managers wondering, how do we deploy electronic voting in our community? What do we do first, right? Well, here's what the statute states. Here's kind of the first box to check. A resolution must be passed authorizing electronic voting to be used in your community, all right? Very important first step. It cannot be bypassed. If it is bypassed and you have electronic votes cast, they're going to be null and void. So you've got to make sure that as a board of directors, as a property manager, you have consulted with your association counsel. There's plenty of great ones out there that understand that this statute has been around since 2015, very standard language by now. And they can certainly get you a copy of a resolution to allow the board to look through it and again, vote on it in a meeting noticed with a 14-day notice. So very important, 14-day notice goes out to the owners, letting them know the board will be voting on a resolution to allow electronic voting. Important here to note, just for clarity purposes, that this is a board vote only for what we call the on switch to electronic voting. So again, owners do not have to vote to allow electronic voting to be used in the community. The board will vote at a meeting on a resolution to allow electronic voting to be used in the community. Again, 14-day notice requirement to the owners, letting them know that meeting's going to happen, right, with an agenda as well. What happens next? Owners get to consent or opt into electronic voting. So resolutions passed. That's kind of our very first step there that we've got. The second step in the process to deploying electronic voting, whether again it's our condos, co-ops, or HOAs, is to get owners to opt in or consent. That's a big word that's used and tossed around. So by default, all of the owners are opted out of electronic voting. They do not have consent to vote electronically. You've got to get it with a provider out there, an electronic voting provider ideally, that can assist you in getting and collecting consents from owners to opt into electronic voting. That could be done as of today and this year by an electronic consent form. Owners no longer have to fill out a physical form with a wet signature and return it. Now you can deploy some of the technologies out there which allow owners to send in a consent form for electronic voting. So an e-consent form to opt into electronic voting. That's your very second step there. For the owners that take no action whatsoever, they're going to continue to receive paper notices. For the owners that do take action and consent to electronic voting and electronic notices, those owners will have the ability to vote electronically. Good news. By getting those owners to opt into electronic voting and electronic notices, the amount of printing and postage typically gets reduced in the likes of 70 to 80%. And so generally speaking, electronic voting is budget neutral because of the reduction in printing and postage in your community, right? Not to speak of all of the efficiencies coming forward here. Now, why do we go through all of this work, right? Because, and I think one of our first questions there, if I'm not mistaken, we go through all this work because voters in the community that vote electronically count towards quorum. So an electronic vote that is cast by an owner does count towards quorum, and the owner does not have to be present at the meeting, physically present there. In addition, owners that vote electronically that have already opted into electronic voting, of course, and now are casting an electronic vote, an official e-vote, also have the ability to send that vote electronically and transmit it from anywhere that they have access to the electronic voting platform, right? So ease of use, you now go away from having to send that owner a paper ballot. You do not have to send that owner an electronic or a paper ballot that you can have them transmit an electronic vote. And in addition to that, again, that owner is counted towards quorum. No longer do you have to ask that owner to submit what historically has been a paper proxy for attendance purposes, right? So I know that our associations out there have asked owners, hey, even if you're not going to attend the meeting, could you at least send in a paper proxy for attendance purposes? That goes away. All the owner needs to do is cast an electronic vote. That automatically counts towards quorum. So hopefully that's clear, that pathway, right, into electronic voting, how you get started. please fold in your association councils out there, your electronic voting providers, and your property manager. With those three subject matter experts working hand in glove in your community, the rollout of electronic voting should be extremely seamless. And we'll leave it at that. Now, I will leave you on one final thought in terms of the electronic voting resolution and making sure that we start the processes of electronic voting. Please make sure to close electronic voting consents 14 days prior to a meeting requiring a membership vote. So I'll give you an example. Annual meeting coming up, 14 days before that annual meeting, if not 30, ideally, no less than 14 days, I should say, but as I would certainly recommend 30 days before. Pausing electronic voters from opting in that have never opted in before is going to limit the amount of chaos that you have. So you do not want an owner opting into electronic voting last minute, and you do not want an owner opting out of electronic voting last minute, because that could create a lot of chaos in the process, especially because generally speaking, an owner is either receiving a paper ballot or they are receiving an electronic one, but they don't receive both. It's one or the other. And so to limit obviously any errors or challenges, you kind of create a little bit of a pause in electronic opt-ins, right? So that consents take a pause about 30 days in our recommendation, but it's no less than 14 days before a meeting that requires a membership vote. You can reopen the consents or opt-ins pretty much year round after that. All right, let's see if we've got any questions related to this. But again, hopefully everyone has looked at the electronic voting statutes, had a clear understanding of those. This is certainly one of the big takeaways for today. So again, question number one, does Florida statute allow for electronic voting to count towards quorum? 100% absolutely. Whether that's a secret ballot that is being casted by an owner that has consented to e-voting, or whether that is a limited proxy for things like amendments, and we'll get into those in today's conversation, that has already been cast by an owner, yes, it counts towards your quorum. All right, so we've got another question here. Does opt-out of e-notices have to be sent via paper or United States Postal Service, or can it be sent via software? So good news. Again, I think whether it was a year ago or more, if we were having this conversation, more than likely that had to traditionally be sent out by mail, right? We had to send out those notices, whether it was for consenting or opting out of electronic voting, by traditional mail methods. Electronic voters, especially get quorum, there might be others out there, can deploy an electronic consent form now to these owners, right? Save the stamp. If you can get those consent forms out, where an owner's opting in or out of electronic voting, it's going to be a lot more streamlined and save you guys a ton of money as well. All right. And I see some questions about hybrid meetings. Good news. We're going to cover some hybrid meeting information coming up, so hang tight. I want to make sure that we cover some of the best practices and are able to help you. I see some virtual board and annual meetings. Good stuff there as well. We'll get to some of those. And I see here, does this apply to HOA voting? 100%, right? So in terms of everything that we're speaking to here today applies to our 720s, as we call them out there. Our 720.317 is specifically the statute that you want to pull up to our HOAs and POAs in the state of Florida. And yes, they can deploy electronic voting in the same methodology that we're speaking to here, whether you're an HOA, condo, or again, our co-ops as well. So yes, Tarmi, thank you for that question. I see floor nominations. We'll get into a little bit of that. Those can be tricky, certainly. So I do appreciate that. And I see things like, can an electronic voting platform help you guys establish quorum? So again, we'll get into those questions. Let me get through a little bit of the presentation again, because it's an official, officially licensed continuing education course. I want to make sure that we get this out to everybody. All right, so let's walk through some of this stuff. What is electronic voting for our, again, folks that have logged into the meeting today? E-voting is the following, all right? Because people say, oh, electronic voting, we kind of think it's all the same. It's almost like saying like, oh, condominium in Florida. It's not all the same, right? I think we know we have many different types of condominiums and amenities and things of that nature. Same thing with e-voting. It's got to match your specific use for your community. There are different types of electronic votes out there, just like there are different types of paper votes that are used in a community. The very first one here that we're going to cover is the advanced electronic vote, all right? What does that mean? Well, exactly what the name implies. An advanced electronic vote is usually being sent out in advance of the official meeting date, right? So we've got a meeting in 2 weeks. It's our elections for the community. And more than likely, we've already sent out, if we're a condominium especially, but many of our new HOAs as well, we've already sent out what we call a secret ballot, right? So those votes can be cast as far out as they are sent. Typically, they're sent out no less than 14 days according to the current statute, but sometimes they're sent out even 30 days out. And owners can begin to cast votes electronically or by paper, whichever method that they've chosen, and have those votes submitted for official, kind of quorum purposes. So those are advanced electronic votes. Again, your typical type of 718, second notice. They're typically a ballot. And in many cases, they can certainly be limited proxies as well that are sent out to owners ahead of the day of the meeting. I love those. Why? Because usually you've got a little ticker symbol in your electronic voting platform, and it begins to give you an idea as to whether you're trending towards quorum, right? So think about that. Weeks ahead of the annual meeting, you've got electronic votes being cast, and you've got an opportunity to see, because they count towards quorum, as we've already established, whether you're trending towards your quorum number. So in many cases, even before the day of the meeting, you already have established the number you needed for quorum, right? You already know whether you're going to meet your quorum requirements. That's an advantage from electronic voting. All right, our second one there, an electronic proxy, right? All right, an electronic proxy is not a secret ballot, and a secret ballot is not an electronic proxy. Okay, we get these requests sometimes from communities, and they tell us, listen, we need a secret ballot with a limited proxy and a general, proxy. They're all different types of documents used in many different ways. Okay, here's the types of proxies that are used in communities today. Again, our 718s, our 719s, and even 20s. We've got general proxies out there for attendance purposes only in many cases. And some of the HOAs, they're used a little bit different. They're used to give away votes if everything happens the day of in terms of the meeting. So that's a general proxy. So general proxies, just to be clear for our condos on the call today, cannot be used to give a vote to another owner for elections, right? That's a no-no in many of our condominiums, and all of our condominiums, and I should say many of our HOAs, right? However, general proxies are usually used for attendance purposes all across our 718s, 19s, and 20s. Limited proxies. We use a lot of limited proxies out there for amendments. Now, I know we've got a lot of people on the call today. We've got close to north of 100 participants here on the call. And I can tell you that every single community that has logged on today, whether you're a condo, co-op, HOA, POA in the state of Florida, there is no doubt in my mind that at some point, if not now, you've got to update your governing docs in your community, right? And your declarations. Limited proxies are usually deployed to update those documents. They got a lot of flexibility. I love the use of those limited proxies, especially electronically speaking. So those are use cases where we use limited proxies. Things like special assessments, things like roofing projects that require perhaps a membership vote. Loans for the community. We had that come up, and it was kind of an unfortunate situation, but fortunately that they had electronic voting deployed. So over in Siesta Key this past year, when the hurricanes rolled through, brought in all the sand, damaged a lot of items, owners were not on the property whatsoever. They were completely off property, as they should have been, kind of safeguarding their lives. However, post-storm, they realized they needed a lot of money. They needed a loan, and it did trigger a membership vote. And so they were able to cast that vote electronically away from the property without having to have an official in-person meeting. And the owners, casted the vote, met the quorum requirements, and passed that specific matter, right, to make sure that they were able to secure a bank loan and begin their repairs. So limited proxies, again, ton of flexibility there. I'll leave it at that. Real-time voting for my folks on floor nominations. I think I see a Susanna there. Floor nominations. All right. Well, here, this is for you. All right. Real-time votes are going to be used, generally speaking, for floor nominations. If this is your case, listen up for my HOAs out there that do require floor nominations and also voting the day of. So if you're an HOA out there, this doesn't apply to our condominiums, because from my understanding, no condominiums allow nominations from the floor. But for the most part, for our HOAs out there that are still kind of on the older meeting procedures, I think they're going to change coming up. I think they're going to change more to a condo style procedure. But if you have the type of meeting procedures that say, hey, listen, all voting happens the day of, nominations from the floor, right, and official voting right there and then in the meeting, you're probably going to need something called a real-time vote. So make sure that you connect with an electronic voting provider out there that you can explain your specific needs to them and that they can meet your requirements. Yes, for the owners on this call, for the property managers, and even there's some association councils, there is technology that exists today that allows owners that have consented to electronic voting to log in to an annual meeting, an election via Zoom webinar technology, not the regular Zoom, but the Zoom webinar where you're given an individual link like what we're using today, and will allow them to cast a real-time vote after the nominations from the floor. All right. So, Susanna, what would happen first is meeting opens, establish a quorum. That includes the folks logged in to Zoom webinar because the webinar technology can recognize which owners they are, count them virtually towards meeting attendance. And then after nominations from the floor have been cast and those candidates have been vetted, there's a real-time vote cast by the owners. The owners that are in person can cast it live. The owners that are attending by Zoom webinar and have already opted into e-voting, right? That's the one caveat there. They can cast an electronic vote. All of this technology exists. You've got to, again, bring this case up to your e-voting provider and make sure that you have a moderator there from the electronic voting provider meeting, someone to create this real-time ballot and really to assist in moderating the technology aspect of all this. So you will need a moderator, at least virtually, from the electronic voting provider in the real-time vote. But again, we can speak more offline for those specific cases that are out there. So again, hopefully kind of walked you through all the different types of electronic votes out there. All right, why are we using electronic voting? Simple, all right? It's increasing participation, and it's reducing printing and mailing costs. I have not seen a case yet where electronic voting does not pay for itself, right? So it's budget neutral, if not better than that. It reduces the in-person meeting attendance. That's not a bad thing. So I hope you guys don't take that in the wrong way, because again, we provide this service to communities out there that are 5,000 doors. And I know there's one specifically in Fort Myers, Babcock Ranch, that's growing to 19,000 doors. Can you imagine the size of the stadium you would need, basically, for lack of a better term, to house 19,000 owners for something like an annual meeting or special meeting? And so you do need to deploy technology out there to make sure that you can wrangle in all these votes in order to continue, right, the processes that you have to use. As far as efficiency, extremely efficient. Transparency and security, big hot topic. So I'm going to spend a quick second here to make sure that we all have a good understanding of this. From a reporting and auditability standpoint, electronic voting creates and provides more auditability, more reporting than you would have with traditional paper-based voting. So I'll say that again. If you're using electronic voting, you have a larger amount of auditability and reporting than you would have with paper-based voting. Why? Because everything's tracked electronically, right? When a ballot was opened, when it was signed, right? Authenticating the owner that is signing that electronic ballot. Reports provided to, of course, the correct parties that need to look through these final reports. Receipts given to owners, right? Let's make sure that we understand this massive amount of transparency and reporting with electronic voting. Owners are provided receipts. It's in the statutes. As we look through the 7, 18, 19, and 20 e-voting statutes, they do require, it's a requirement for an owner to walk away with a receipt from their electronic vote. That's not optional. The electronic voting provider must transmit a receipt to these owners, and it's a very granular receipt. Let's not kid ourselves. It's not "you voted, have a nice day." It actually says the date, the time, confirmation number, how they voted. So for all those folks, concerned with security or transparency, I let them know, grab your receipts, meet at the local coffee shop by your community, and those results should match exactly what you have been provided by any electronic voting provider as far as your final tallies, right? So final tally report should match all of the receipts. And in terms of security, make sure that you guys obviously are connecting with an electronic voting provider out there that is housing and storing this data securely. I know, we use Amazon Web Services, for example, AWS. So certainly this meeting data, and again, the reports are being redundantly backed up in secure data centers. And of course, the data is kept not only for all the statutory requirements, but beyond that as well. You have those reports available to you much after the statutes expire. So those reports can be kept and housed there. Virtual meetings, and again, We'll get to some of these questions. I see we've got some good ones. So again, I do appreciate that. I'll leave plenty of time here coming up. As far as virtual meetings, here's what we're doing today, right? And some of these questions kind of asked about some of these virtual meetings. Virtual meetings are being used at a very high rate. There's some communities still doing everything in person. However, I do want you to know that there are different types of virtual meetings and virtual meeting platforms specifically out there. So make sure that you remember that when you're using that. I hear, whether it's Teams, right? Whether it's Zoom, even WebEx, still out there. Quite a few. Here's the skinny on what we're talking about here. Make sure that you have the right type of virtual meeting platform that you're using for your meeting. And why do we use virtual meetings? As everybody probably knows on the call already, they're easy, they're great. You can get a ton of people virtually speaking in that virtual room together, and they can be in different parts of the world, as we know. So there are different types of virtual meetings and virtual meeting platforms. The different types of virtual meetings that I have here before you are the fully virtual, right? Only online, only virtual. The only time I'm seeing this in the state of Florida, by the way, because these different states have different statutes, is for board meetings. I am seeing communities, condos, and HOAs and co-ops that do have the ability to have fully virtual board meetings, all right, without an official physical room. It's happening. I do believe that certainly there's precedent for them to do that for the board meetings. Now, for things like an annual meeting or a special meeting, there are still a lot of requirements out there, especially for condos and HOAs, to provide an in-person option. So that would take us into hybrid meeting, right? What is a hybrid meeting? A hybrid meeting is a virtual meeting in conjunction with an in-person option. I'm sure many of you on the call today have had these. If not, at least you can visualize what it is. You've got your community clubhouse. There's hopefully a monitor, a projector, a separate microphone like the one I've got here. I've got a separate microphone here today. It was no more than about $55, right? It works really well. And you've got a separate speaker as well. So please do not use the laptop for everything in these hybrid meetings. Make sure you have at least some simple equipment, and I'll walk you through some of those best practices in just a few slides. But a virtual meeting is being held with some sort of equipment in a room, maybe a community room or a local library. I've seen, gosh, just about everything. Places of worship being used, even for our community. Rick Case Honda, the dealership, has a community service room, right? So, or a community center that we can use. Have some technology in there. Make sure that you're able to log in to a Zoom meeting, and so that everyone that is attending in that room can be seen by the folks on the computer, and the folks on the computer can be seen by everyone that is in person. They'll be projected in a monitor, right? So hybrid meetings, we've seen them on a very small scale, and I've seen them in a very large scale with communities that required a ballroom at the Intercontinental in Doral, right? That's okay as well. If you've got that type of level of meeting and you need that, and you need the cookies, the coffee, the banquet staff, and a full AV production for an annual meeting, because it is that important, do not hesitate to do that as well. I know it works very well in that capacity for that HOA. So why are we holding these virtual meetings? It's a cost reduction, believe it or not. Again, 1,000 doors, 500 doors, 2,000 doors, 5,000 door communities. Where do you house all these people? There's no way you've got a community center big enough for that, at least not that I've seen. You certainly have more control over the audience. More or less, everyone can come in with the chat feature turned off, with things like muted, right? So you want to deploy the correct type of virtual meeting platform for your meeting. There's two types of virtual meeting platforms, folks, out there, in case you didn't know this. You have your traditional virtual meetings platform, something like a Zoom meetings, right? Or Teams meeting that creates a generic link. Be careful with those. They work very efficiently, especially if you have a smaller crowd and they're not too rowdy. That is your traditional virtual meeting kind of production. That's okay. Be careful with the general link, because you may not know who's logging into the meeting, right? You might have things like Kitty Cat 2000 or, Miami 305 on those meetings. There's so many other folks that can get that link, and it would be really challenging to know who it is that's on the call. However, if you want some enhanced technology, use what we're using today, which is webinar style of virtual meeting, right? So webinar style virtual meetings, as you kind of experienced today, and I'm sure you know this already, sends an individual invitation to each owner. So keep that in mind. Each owner has an individual invitation that cannot be passed along to 4 or 5 other folks. And once that owner clicks on their link, checks into the meeting, you're going to know exactly who entered your meeting. All right. It's almost like giving an invitation individually to everyone before you allow them to come into the meeting. That's called traditionally out there webinar style. For my larger communities on the call today, please make sure that you're deploying a webinar style technology for your annual meetings and for your special meetings. Maybe not so much needed for your board meetings, but at least for your annual and your special meetings. Why? Usually you have a large amount of participation, and usually it's very challenging to know who's even on the call unless you're using webinar style. Most of these virtual meeting providers have a webinar option, right? Whether it's your Teams or your Zoom, whoever you're using out there, I think even GoToMeeting has a webinar style option that they do provide. So hopefully that helped a little bit. But again, there's a lot of automation there, a lot of improved meeting efficiency, shorter meeting times. All right, hopefully for my LCAMs on the call today, we can all agree that shorter meeting times is a good thing, especially because that means it's more efficient, right? And again, I'll revert back to this, and I know we just mentioned this for e-voting. There's more reporting and auditability in a virtual meeting than there is in a normal meeting. There's a ton of reports. I know that we're doing a recording today. It's kind of tracking, even minutes to some degree, right? And that is going to be very helpful. So and I do want to get to those questions out there. So look, like with everything else out there, let's make sure that we're considering packages. This is all rewarding stuff, but you've got to get your ducks in a row, as they say, and you have to make sure that you have a good understanding of how to deploy this technology, the right resources, have some subject matter experts supporting you, self-managed community, or if you've got kind of a manager that already is assisting with many other things. So get some help, get some assistance, and make sure that you overly communicate with your owners as to what you're deploying and how you're changing the procedures. If you've gone from an all in-person meeting to a virtual, maybe hybrid meeting, make sure these owners know that. Make sure that they understand how they're going to get their link, right? If it's a webinar style link that each of them gets versus a generic link, make sure you communicate that with them as well. All right. Because so communicate the meeting procedures, have a dress rehearsal. And again, we'll speak to a little bit more about this kind of towards the end, but make sure that you are setting the expectations for how the experience is going to change in your community. All right. If you don't take those steps, it can be challenging, right? You can lead to poor attendee experience. If you try to do this all on your own, I've seen folks out there, oh, we'll just get a regular Zoom account and we're going to do something like, Google Forms and create our own electronic balloting system. Absolute no for the state of Florida. Get some help, all right? Get some help from a professional out there to assist you to make sure. So adapt these meeting procedures. Make sure your meeting notices state how owners can log into these meetings, how they're going to have an opportunity to attend, and make sure that they get a full understanding of the electronic voting rollout in your communities as well. All right. So choose the right solution. For the folks on my call today, and I know there's quite a few out there, make sure that whoever you use for electronic voting, and I have no doubt that every single community on the call today is going to deploy electronic voting at some time or another, right? Because this is the way moving forward. Make sure that you've had a very good conversation with your electronic voting provider and that they're able to meet your community's needs. This should not be a generic one size fits all, right? We've got some HOAs out there with nominations from the floor. We've got our traditional condos, for the most part, that have a very traditional experience on annual meetings. Please ensure that you've communicated with your e-voting provider exactly what you're going to be using this technology for, what you need assistance with, and make sure that they have communicated back with you that they're able to fulfill everything that you need, right? Again, doing this all on your own via a self-service, electronic voting option could be very challenging for you as an owner. Please try to find a fully managed solution, an electronic voting solution with plenty of resources. All right. So here's a quick case study. And again, thanks for the questions. We'll get to them. HOA is planning to conduct an upcoming annual meeting. This is, I have to admit, HOA that I've been to. I attended this meeting, so it was close to the heart there. 500 unit HOA, Nominations from the floor only, right? Community center is going to be used for the meeting. Owners must show up to vote in person, 7 p.m. Monday evening. Show up and vote or send in a general proxy for at least attendance purposes. Nominations from the floor. So if you're one of the HOAs out there, this is a very challenging situation. No Zoom meeting, by the way. We're doing all of this 1980s style, right? Well, let me tell you, the limitations that that community provided themselves in that case study created the following: manual registration, right? Tabulating of all the attendance of the registrants in person there, distributing all the notices by email, collecting the candidate nominations live, executing the voting period while accounting for the unique requirements. All of that's done live. That's going to be very challenging. I was at that meeting specifically, just to go back there, and check-in took 2 hours. So we had 2 hours just to check in the owners, nominations from the floor. Candidates weren't vetted very well. They couldn't look up everything in terms of background and whether they owed money. And it was very, very challenging. That would have been very streamlined with e-voting. For our condos out there, same thing. If you've got your traditional kind of, annual meeting and you're a very small condo, you might get away without much help. But on the larger scale, please make sure that you are getting some resources. For the most part, all of this can be streamlined with a lot of help. So instead of having people wait in a 2 hour line to check into these meetings, they can be checked in electronically, right? Very quickly. So I'm going to wind it down here because I know we have some questions and I do want to get to those. I'm going to leave you with some best practices. All right. So again, on the last few slides here, thank you for bearing with me. Best practices. Establish and follow these ground rules. Please consult your association, legal counsel in your communities. Do not shock them the day of your annual meeting by them walking in and someone from the community telling them electronic voting's been deployed. We're allowing e-ballots, to be turned in, and the association attorney had no idea, right, that you guys even allowed for electronic voting. Please make sure that they're in on all of this, as well as your management team and board members. Review and account for your pre-existing bylaws and procedures. Choose a suitable platform. I said that, right? Till the cows come home. Make sure that the platform you're choosing out there and the vendors provide you with the support you need, right? This is not a one size fits all again. Adjust your meeting format a little bit. You might have to adjust some things. Make sure that you hold a dress rehearsal, test all of this stuff ahead of time, and make sure that you're prepared from a technical support standpoint and from an in-person standpoint as well. Looking ahead, here's what we've got and what we're seeing. More and more condos and HOAs are embracing electronic voting at a very large, we've got from 36 door communities out there that are embracing electronic voting because the owners are never in town. They live away. It's a rental community for the most part, and they still need to get all these governance matters done. Again, from north of 19,000 door communities, right, that say this absolutely makes sense for us. So, we're going to continue to see more hybrid meetings. We're going to continue to see more deploying of electronic voting to ease the burden on things like amendments out there and annual meetings as well. And we do believe that this will segue in the very future to something like a full virtual process. But this is certainly the transitionary phase. It is not as difficult as many folks on the call think with just an email address from an owner and simple use of an internet browser. Most owners can vote electronically. So it's very simple to use and is very cost efficient. The likes of usually just a few dollars per door per year, you can deploy electronic voting in your communities out there, usually for less than the cost of one mailer. All right. I've got a little present for everybody here, and I am going to get to the Q&As. But for those folks on the call today, that especially our LCAMs that would like a little tool here, our development team has created this for you. So it's a meeting deadlines calculator. What it does is it allows all of the folks on the call that want to look up in reverse their meeting deadlines. So you put in the date of your annual meeting, it counts the notice requirements dates backwards for you, right? I've got a QR code up there for you. Feel free to scan that with your phone or tablet. And this is available on our website as well. You can go to getquorum.com and look for our Florida meetings notice deadline calculator. That basically QR code is just taking you to the link. So it's an easy tool. You put in your annual meeting date and year. And again, it gives you all the notice requirements counting backwards, right? Your 60-day day of notice, your 30 days out there, and your candidacy nomination forms deadline as well. So hopefully that's helpful. I'll leave it up for another 10 seconds here as we wind this down so that we can get to the Q&A for you guys. And again, if you need that from us, reach out or go to our website, getquorum.com. All right, folks. No, that was a lot, but thank you. Certificate of completion here. Feel free to scan that for my LCAMs that would like to receive an official certificate of completion. However, we will be again providing credit to all of our license scams that have provided us with your license number. We will be providing credits, putting it in the DBPR, probably no later at this point than something like next week or the following. So we will put that continuing education 1 hour course for you. All right. So give me another 5 seconds here on the certificate of completion. And if not, again, this recording and this deck can be made available for you. We've got a course evaluation form. This is a statutory requirement here from the DBPR. They're asking us to please get some course evaluation feedback. If you had a great experience, please let us know. If you had a less than great experience, please let us know as well. We're happy to make some changes, adjustments, and make sure that everyone gets a better experience moving forward, right? That we're always aiming high and trying to get better in these continuing education courses as we roll them out. So leave that up there for another 5 seconds here. Course evaluation form. If you've got feedback for us, again, good, bad, or indifferent, please let us know what you see out there. And we want to thank you for attending the electronic voting continuing education course today. My information is here. It is available to you for the folks on the call. And I'm going to try to get to all of these questions. We've got a ton of them. They just bubbled up. Please get my information. I'm happy to directly respond to you. If you have questions about your unique situation in your community, questions about something specific that maybe we didn't cover in today's electronic voting continuing education course, that's fine. We're here to help, right? We're here to help. We're here to be a resource to you. And again, subject matter experts. So I will leave that up as I'm answering some questions. That's the good news. I won't take that down, and I'll get to some of the questions here and see if we can answer those. All right. So here we go. Let's start with the first one by Mr. Stewart here. What technological options exist for hybrid meetings? We went through those, which is good. It's going to allow everyone to speak here and see throughout the meeting. Again, in that specific scenario, hybrid meeting, you want to make sure that any room that you're using is wired with Wi-Fi, right? So it has a strong internet connection, has some sort of monitor, hopefully a large projector and a monitor. I know that I've seen the projectors for less than $100 out there on Amazon or any of these websites. So large, maybe almost 7,500, inch screen, and you can project the images there. You will need an external microphone. There's a ton of great ones out there that you can connect to a laptop in that room, and you will need also an external speaker, right? Why? Because everyone in the room has to hear. If someone unmutes themselves in Zoom and speaks, everyone in the room has to hear that person as well. So those are kind of the basics there. Everyone should be able to see and hear each other and stay muted. If not, again, check in with us if you need any more information. So we've got that one. Check. In terms of the next question here, this is applied to HOA voting. Absolutely. We've answered that. We're done. Are fully virtual board and annual meetings, no in person, allowed by Florida statutes? Not to our understanding. I do have some HOAs out there that are challenging that. I do have some HOAs out there that are creating their association docs from inception, kind of my newer ones. I'm going to call them some of the newer HOAs that are very, very large out there that are challenging that and saying, hey, we are so large, right? We are 10,000, 20,000 doors. There is no way we can have an in-person option, or venue for this many people. So they're going fully virtual for their annual meetings. I will tell you, I do not know of a case in the condominium world for our 718s that a fully virtual annual meeting is allowed. There must be an in-person option. That doesn't mean you need to have the biggest room in the world. They may reach capacity and you may have to force folks from there to log in, right, to a virtual option if you reach the capacity for that room. However, there does have to be an in-person option there as well. All right. Floor nominations, we covered that, Susanna. Hopefully that helped a little bit. E-voting platform, how can we help us establish quorum? Okay, so how can an electronic voting platform help us establish quorum for voters who have consented to e-vote, but who choose not to vote for a particular meeting? That's a great question. Thank you, Stu, for that one. In terms of e-voting platforms out there, there shouldn't be one-trick ponies. They shouldn't just be helping you send out an electronic ballot. I know with platforms like a Quorum, there's something that we deploy, which is called the reminder email campaign. What does that mean? That means we provide little subtle nudges for these owners that have opted in but not yet casted a vote. Closer it gets to the day of the meeting, the more reminder emails can be sent to these owners. So it's kind of like that 1 minute survey. If you've ever stayed at a Marriott hotel or Hilton or one of these hotel chains, they send you a direct link. They don't ask you to log in back into your frequent, kind of flyer or frequent stay account. They send you this link in a very nice email saying, thank you for staying at this property. We just need about 1 minute of your time. Click on this link. You're going to be taken directly to that 1 minute survey. That's the same technology that we deploy here and the technology you want out there, because you want to nudge those owners in getting their participation. And by the way, make sure that you also check back in on your electronic voting platform, because it does let you know which owners have not casted a vote. So you do have that information available to you out there. Can you make phone calls? Sure, if you feel like it's got to get to those lengths that you're missing a few votes in order to meet quorums. But for the most part, a reminder email goes a long way, or a few reminder emails go a long way. All right, let's get through this. How far in advance do we need to advise the membership they can no longer send in consent notices? So we went through that. Thank you, Tarmi, for that question. From what we've read in the statutes, 14 days prior to a meeting requiring a membership vote. So whenever that official meeting is, your annual meeting or special meeting that requires a membership vote, you've got to backtrack no less than 14 days. And you've got to put a pause. We're going to call it not stop, but a pause in e-consents. After that, you can reopen them back up. What we have as a best practice, especially by way of kind of the templates we send out there for the electronic voting resolution, is a 30-day, right? We feel like it's less chaotic if it's sent out 30 days before your official meeting that requires a membership vote. Pause consents, pause opting in or out. If you've opted in at that point, you're going to be voting electronically. If you've stayed opted out at that point, 30 days out, then you're going to receive a paper-based notice and paper-based voting option. All right. Very interesting. Thank you. Thank you, Mickey. Appreciate that. All right. We've got a question from Lori here. If we don't get enough vote and we want to continue the meeting at a future date within the 90 days, what is the process on the get quorum end? Very interesting. Thank you so much for that question, Lori, because what that means is if you usually want to recess and reconvene a meeting, more than likely we're speaking, just to give everyone context here still on the call, we're speaking to something like an amendment, right? We're generally speaking, we're not talking about a secret ballot. Secret ballots are kind of dead on arrival the day of the meeting. You either got enough right after the meeting was open and closed, or you did not meet the quorum requirements for a secret ballot. However, for our limited proxies out there, they do have some flexibility, some magic powers, if you will, and they do allow for, if you have not met the correct quorum requirements, for the meeting to be recessed and reconvene at a later time, right? So within 90 days from the original date of that meeting, you can continue to collect limited proxies on top of the proxies that you already collected for things like amendments, again, material alteration votes, special assessments. The process in terms of get quorum is easy. You would connect with your account manager. You would let them know we are going to recess and reconvene this meeting for a later date. Make sure you reopen the voting. Do not close it. So our team would essentially be working with you to make sure that the voting does not close the day of the meeting, which is traditionally what we do, that the voting continues to be open 90 days beyond the original date of the meeting, and then there's a hard close date after that. So just again, in our world, you would connect with your account manager, talk to them, make sure they understand exactly what you're trying to accomplish and that the meeting is going to be recessed and reconvene at a later time. Andrew, we've got, if a paper vote is submitted ahead of a meeting, can it be changed by the owner? Can this happen with electronic voting? Well, there's different types of paper votes and there's different types of e-votes, Andrew. So thank you for that question. If it is a secret ballot situation with no revocation whatsoever, whether an owner is submitting it by paper or an owner is submitting it by electronic means, it is done, right? Once the final submission has taken place, no revocations. An owner cannot change their mind either on an e-vote or on a paper vote if it is a final, again, non-revocable secret ballot. If we're talking about a limited proxy, like the situation that was just brought up for things like special assessments, amendments, things of that nature, limited proxies do have revocation capabilities. So in both the paper and the electronic world, those limited proxies can be revoked and resubmitted up until the deadline where the polls close. All right. So just to be clear, once the links are disabled and the polls are closed, no more voting. However, up to that point, if you are using a limited proxy, it can be revoked and resubmitted. All right. Let's keep on here. We're doing good. If you wish to use a webinar style meeting, right, for more than one meeting per year, is this available with Get Quorum? Check in with us. We're working on kind of providing that context, but yes, it is. So check in with us directly on those needs. In terms of, is there an application for this or just a web browser? So Andrew, thank you for that question. If you're referring to electronic voting as a whole out there, there's a bunch of different options with electronic voting providers. Some of them will require an app and require owners to sign in and create a username and password. I think that's extremely cumbersome. In terms of platforms like Get Quorum, it will only require the owner to use a web browser, so internet anywhere, any web browser, and it will not require an application. Owner just needs to have their unique link that's been sent to them in order to access their voting materials. Very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. We appreciate that. We will be sharing the slides of this webinar and the recording as well to everyone. So thank you. The 1 hour credit on your license, Madeline, make sure that you've sent your information in from that original registration email. If not, send it to me. If you've never sent us your official license information and you are unable to reply back to the original source that sent you this invitation, you've got my email there. Just send it over and we'll make sure that we get you taken care of. So yep, Susanna, same thing. Where you send your cam, you can send it right over to me. We'll make sure we get you taken care of. Oh, the QA again from the DBPR. All right, let me go back here for course evaluation form from the DBPR. All right, if Andrew's still on the call, I'll give you about 10 seconds there, course evaluation. And then one more here coming up. Hopefully you got that. And if not, check in with us. Certificate of completion. There you are, DBPR. All right. Hopefully, again, you got that. If not, the recording will be sent out to you and you can actually scan it from the very recording that we get you as well there. So we can get that out. And there's the meeting notice deadlines one more time. All right. Again, we'll get that out to you. So hopefully you got that. From a Mary, you haven't been able to download the form. Let us know which one. Again, reach out to me via email if any of these forms are challenging for you. The certificate of completion is a formality. We're going to give you the credit for the course, but certainly that's just for you to have on your end that you did complete the course. Again, if you're not able to download something, please check in with us. We're down to the last few questions, trying to stick the landing here. Does the association documents have to give the board the power to adopt the resolution for electronic voting? No, Christopher, you do not have to amend the association docs to give the board the power to adopt the resolution for e-voting. This is a statutory procedure right now. It takes precedent over any association doc. So if your association documents are completely silent on electronic voting, which most of them are, resolution to allow authorized electronic voting, board vote only, that will take precedence over any current documents you have. Tarmi says, thank you, quite back. Julie, registration as a board member, we should have your information, yes, for a certificate, absolutely, we do there. And Beatrice says, thank you back. All right, we appreciate you guys tuning in today. Hope that Q&A session wasn't too rushed, but we did stick the landing. It's 1 o'clock. I want to give everyone back the rest of their Thursday. I know we're all busy out there enjoying this warm but great weather still in Florida. Rainy season hasn't quite started yet. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please check in with us. Know that you have a resource out there. Wishing everyone a beautiful rest of the week. Weekend's almost here. And I can't thank you enough for tuning in to today's presentation. On behalf of Get Quorum and myself, have a wonderful day.